Okay, we are back. Our second segment for the night talks about an article written by the Daily Line, but published in Block Club Chicago. The title is Alderman Pounced Brown, Lightfoot Stand By False Narrative Linking Courts to Shootings. And there is more on this subject we'll get to on Friday. It's building. From the media. They just don't have the evidence and the data to support this. This is a agenda. It's ideology. It is not fact. So let's look at the article. From the article, this quoting from the article, like most of the country's large cities, Chicago saw violent crime skyrocket after the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic last year. Brown, Superintendent Brown, and Mayor Lightfoot have pointed to signs in the data that the swell could be leveling off, but shootings and homicides remain higher this year than they were halfway through 2020. Of course they are. I'll tell you why. Bad journalism. At least 90 people were shot in Chicago during the 4th of July holiday week. 4th of July weekend, including two police officers and two police officers and 6-year-old girl, according to the Tribune. Damn, got the hiccups now all of a sudden. So yes, wow, shootings are worse this year than last 6 months of last year. Okay, the first 6 months. Well, you realize the first 3 months, or almost 2.5, 3 months of last year, there was no pandemic. Stop doing this bullshit stats that you don't understand and don't make sense. This is the problem when you don't have reporters that know what the hell they're doing. You can't take an average idiot reporter and put them on a crime beat or crime article and say, understand the data and go and write an article. Now, to be honest with you, most of the crime reporters that are horseshit in Chicago anyways would make the same bullshit line. It's just wrong. Bad data. So that's a rip on the journalist, the Block Club, and Daily Line. That should have never gotten through. Next. This is Brown. He then pointed to Cook County court system, meaning Brown, citing what he called an explosion of violent offenders being released back into our communities on electronic monitoring. He listed off multiple examples of arrestees whom judges have released with ankle bracelets, only for them to commit another shooting in at least one case after cutting off their bracelet. I continue. There are too little consequences for violent offenders in our courts, Brown said. The explosion of electronic monitoring is harming our city. It's harming our children. Liar. This is also a trope by Cook County Sheriff Tom Dart. Remember him? He used to be relevant to things in Chicago politics. Now he's disappeared. Probably going to retire. I would assume he's got nowhere to go politically. I don't know where he would go. I mean, Lightfoot may follow him in the way her mayoralship is going. But no, that's untrue. Yes, people on electronic monitoring and people out on bail reform has definitely increased. But if you're going to open your mouth like this, Superintendent, connect it. You have a $1.7 billion agency. You have PhDs in your research and development division, which they renamed to some other bullshit name that never does real data analysis, or truthful, I should say. Connect it. You have all the data. You should be able to do it. He can't, because this is propaganda and lies. This is what they do. So here we go. Also, bond reform went in 2017, ladies and gentlemen. Why didn't it increase violence in 17 or 18 or 19 or the first half of 20? Ooh, I wonder why. Let's see, was there something that wasn't involved in Chicago in 17, 18, and 19 in the first 3 months of 20, or almost 3 months of 20, that actually may be responsible for the uptick in crime and violence? That correlates? An international pandemic, maybe? Okay, let's go on. Some aldermen, like Alderman Anthony Napolitano, who makes our list a couple segments down, I think it's the next segment, actually, him talking to Fox News, because that's where him and Alderman Lopez go run, because it's like a marriage. It's an ideological marriage. Some aldermen, like Alderman Anthony Napolitano, 41st Ward, echoed Brown's claims, saying the county's constant catch and release system of allowing arrestees to bond out is hurting officer morale. He traced issue back to Evans' 2017 order for judges not to charge bonds that exceed arrestees' ability to pay. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, bond was created to make sure that people show up for their court hearings. The judges have the ability, and always have, is to make sure that people that they feel are legitimately a threat, they don't get bail. Everyone else, if you're going to give bail to people, why should the poor get a bail they can't afford, and the same person, rich, can pay it and get out if they're the same equal threat? Now, I bet what you really get to here, ladies and gentlemen, is this is code for race. They want poor black and brown people locked up, and they're happy with middle class and rich white people getting out. This is, in my view, at least partially coded race language. It's certainly class-related language. Don't get that wrong. No. Alderman Daniel LaSpada brought up a WBEZ report from May that unearthed hacked internet emails from Deputy Mayor Susan Lee, who resigned on Lightfoot, got the hell out of there last year, urging top officials in the mayor's office and police department to drop their talking points that judges were driving a spike in crime. Lee conveyed data showing that very few folks who bond out actually commit violent offenses with a gun. Continue. Are we really seeing that there is a connection, not just anecdotal, between bond reform and violent crimes being committed? LaSpada asked Brown. Committed. Next. A few people is problematic in our neighborhoods. Oh no, so this is Brown. So remember, Susan Lee did this. We covered it a month or two ago on the show. There are emails when Brown and Lightfoot started this in 2019 that Susan Lee are like, we got to stop saying this. I went to the police department and asked them for proof, and they don't have any proof. So did the community groups. And Lee said, hey, the community groups like Chicago Cred and Ready Chicago, and the other one I'm not thinking at the moment, we've had on the show before, Eddie Bocanegra, go search it, it's been on the show. They went to the mayor and they were like, hey, that's not what's doing it. We've got data. Susan Lee went to the police department and said, do you want to see it? Because they've asked you before and you haven't wanted to see it. And they're like, no, we don't want to see it. We don't want any part. No response. Of course they don't. Because it goes against their propaganda. It's a talking point that has no functional reality and basis in reality. They can't prove it. It's an ideology. It's no proof. So this is Brown again now, okay? A few people, I'm assuming even was before this, but I'll get the quote. A few people is problematic in our neighborhoods, Brown said. A few people killed Jocelyn Adams. A few people committed a murder-suicide this month. A few people for the victim is everything. We see it in our communities. It is the explanation. Violent offenders need to be in jail. Screw science. He knows better than anyone. He just knows. He just knows. Does that sound like Donald Trump to you? Is not Mayor Lightfoot and Brown mouthing off with no evidence to support it, just pushing in the face of all this mountain of evidence? And not just Fox, and not just Evans. We're going to talk about an Evans letter on the topic on Friday. But Loyola University did an independent analysis. It ain't bond reform, brother. It ain't. That's, I bet, one of the reasons if someone got Susan Lee, the deputy mayor for Lightfoot, who was supposed to come in and help with criminal justice matters, if someone actually got Susan Lee to talk, I think this constant BS coming out of the mayor and coming out of the superintendent is one of the reasons. So, right, this is why he goes to just a few people. It's fine. Don't make a difference if they're driving all the violence, but any violence at all, it's a problem. That was a towel. He's lying. And by the way, this is what David Brown did in Dallas. This is what he does. He lies. Spins, lies. This is it. He had a career of it in Dallas. I knew it was coming. He has fulfilled it. Next. This is a pretty long one. Alderman Carlos Ramirez Rosa, 35th Ward, grew visibly frustrated with Brown's reversion to citing specific episodes, saying the city shouldn't be based the city shouldn't be basing our public safety strategies, shouldn't be basing our policy on anecdotal evidence. Ramirez Rosa held up a copy of a report published by Loyola University Research last year showing that just 3% of defendants who were released on bond went on to commit new crimes during their pre-trial period. Don Steeman, Dave Olson, professors at Loyola University Chicago Criminal Justice and Criminology Department were on the show. Go look, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, Facebook, go look in the archives. That interview is up there. We've talked to them about that. Study. You're pushing a bad narrative, Ramirez Rosa said. If you continue to push that narrative, I'm going to have to say, Superintendent, that you're a liar. I supported you for this position because I thought you were going to be a reformer, the alderman added. What I've said, my dog wants to get into the podcast here and the show. She'll come down, hopefully, or maybe not. What I heard instead is the same false narratives and broken talking points that have led to this broken criminal justice system. Brown said he had not read Loyola study. Wait for it, ladies and gentlemen. Wait for it. But that he would encourage its authors to come to the South and West Side and see up close the effects of murders committed out on bond. The effects of murders committed by people out on bond. Superintendent, $1.7 billion. $1.7 billion police department. And you keep saying it's people out on bond. You don't have data to back it up. You can't refute Kim Fox or Evans showing you data. You can't refute the independent review of the data by David Olson and Don Steeman at Loyola University, professors, both of them, doctors, both of them. You can't combat it. You're just saying, oh, just come to the South and West Sides. That's crapola. That response by itself should be his walking papers. He needs to go. He's being dishonest, he's lying, he's being disingenuous. It's all propaganda. He needs to go. He won't go because he is pushing a Lori Lightfoot-centered, a Lori Lightfoot-backed narrative, which is doing what every other single mayor has ever done in Chicago, which is blame everyone else for the crime in Chicago, while she does nothing different in the city to change the circumstances in the communities to stop the violence. David Brown must go. And police reform voters need to really rethink about who they're going to vote for in the next election. I can't imagine it being Lightfoot. Her allowing her superintendent to lie and lie and lie and lie. And the reason I say lie is he's got a $1.7 billion police department. If there was data to back up what he was saying, they'd produce it. I know one of the PhD researchers in that department. I do. I know another person I met at Chicago Hack Night in that department. They're smart. They're smart. They could produce it if they have the data. They are lying. It's the only reason they're not producing the data to refute that. Now, the reason is Brown is incapable, like most police superintendents, of really affecting massive change to violence in Chicago. So they're grasping at anything they can. What would be interesting is if Fox and Evans just started locking everyone up and the violence continued. Then what would Brown do? He wouldn't be fired because Lightfoot likes his lying, obviously. If Lightfoot was going to be half the mayor she actually promised to be, he'd be gone. He'd be fired. He needs to go. He's just lying. That's all it is. And we're going to talk about Friday. These articles are just piling up on him now. The BGA's got one. BEZ's got one. They can't prove it. They keep saying prove it, and they can't do it. We're going to try to get Chip Mitchell on the show from BEZ to talk about an article he just wrote, I think, that broke today. It is lies. When an organization that has $1.7 billion at its disposal says something, and you ask them to back it up with data, and they can't, it's because they're lying. And remember, this is lying by the superintendent under Mayor. This is Mayor Lightfoot's personally selected, hand-picked superintendent. She picked this guy. She owns him. He's been lying since mid-2019, as far as we know, when this started. What are you going to do about it, Mayor? You're letting him lie to the people day in and day out in the media, day in and day out, day in and day out. What are you going to do?